Hello and welcome. Today we're going to get into the language that really shapes one of the most important conversations out there, the search for fairness in education. We're going to break down the key terms and the competing ideas that define what it even means to give everyone a fair shot to learn, to achieve, and, to succeed. But hey, before we dive in, if you could just take a quick second to subscribe, turn on that notification bell, give this explainer a like, and maybe drop a comment to support the channel, that would be amazing. Your engagement really does help us explore more topics just like this one. All right, so here's the plan for today. We're going to kick things off with the big one, equality of opportunity. Then we'll jump right into the great schooling debate. From there, we'll take a hard look at the problem with school rankings. Check out the different ways we try to bridge the gap financially, and then we'll wrap up with a look at some of the other really important debates that are shaping education today. Okay, let's get started with the absolute foundation for everything we're going to talk about, equality of opportunity. Seriously, you can think of this as the bedrock, the core idea that every other debate in education is built on. It really all comes down to this one huge question. What does fair actually look like? Does it mean every single student gets the exact same thing? Or does it mean that every student, no matter where they start in life, has a real, genuine chance to reach their full potential? That tension right there is really at the heart of this entire conversation. And that brings us right here to this critical definition, equality of opportunity. It's this guiding principle that says a person's background, their family's income, where they live, their race or gender, none of that should decide how far they can go in school. It sounds so simple on the surface, doesn't it? But actually putting it into practice, well, that's one of the most complex challenges any society has to face. So, if we have this ideal of equality in our minds, how do we actually go about building a system that can achieve it? Well, that question throws us right into Section 2, the great schooling debate. And this is where we see two totally different competing philosophies on how you should structure an entire education system from the ground up. Now, this slide lays out the two opposing models so clearly. On one side, you've got selective schooling. Here, getting in is conditional. You either have to pass a tough entrance exam to prove your academic merit, or, like with a lot of private schools, your family has to be able to afford the fees. But on the other side, you have comprehensive schooling. This whole model is built on universal access. Basically, all the kids in a local area go to the same school, there's no entrance exam, and the government pays for it. And the main argument you hear against selective systems can be summed up in this one word, elitism. The idea is that by kind of creaming off the top students or only letting in those who can pay, you end up creating a two-track system. One track for a small, privileged group that gets a fantastic education, and another track for everybody else. And that can really limit opportunity for a lot of people. Okay, so whether a system is selective or comprehensive, we all want to know which schools are doing a good job, right? But what happens when the way we measure success actually ends up hurting our goal of fairness? This brings us to the problem with rankings. And it's a classic case of good intentions having some really tricky unintended consequences. What we're talking about are league tables. These are basically published lists that rank schools, and almost always, that ranking is based on just one thing, student exam results. Now look, the idea behind them is a good one. Create transparency for parents, push schools to get better. But as we're about to see, boiling a school's entire value down to a single number can create a really powerful and often destructive cycle. And this just perfectly illustrates the chain reaction. First, the rankings come out, and right away, a story starts to form about good schools and bad schools. This sparks this intense competition for parents to get their kids into those top-ranked schools. Now, families with more money and resources can often move into the right neighborhoods or pay for tons of tutoring to get an edge. And this movement of motivated students and parents away from the lower-ranked schools can really just diminish the opportunities for the kids who are left behind. The really crucial thing to get here is that this cycle doesn't just show inequality. It can actively perpetuate it. It keeps it going. It becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. A school gets labeled good, so it attracts more resources and high-achieving students, and guess what? Its scores stay high. A school labeled bad can get trapped, struggling to find experienced teachers and dealing with a student body that has higher needs. The impact this has on students and teachers in these so-called failing schools can be just massive, making it even harder to break that cycle. So, all of this naturally leads to the next big question. If a family's financial situation is such a huge factor in all of this, can we use financial tools to level the playing field? I mean, can we basically use money to create a fairer system? And here are the main tools we use to try and do exactly that. You've got scholarships, which are usually based on merit. They're rewards for doing really well academically. Then you have bursaries, which are based on financial need. They're given to students from lower income families so they can afford to go. And finally, there are student loans, which are a different route where students borrow money for their education and then pay it back later once they're out in the workforce and earning. Now, it's really important to get that these financial tools become absolutely essential at the level of tertiary education. We're talking university and college. With the cost of higher education going up and up, being able to get this kind of support is often the one thing that decides whether a student can even continue their education after high school. And yet, even with all of these financial programs, we end up here at this pretty sobering conclusion. After decades of scholarships, bursaries, and loan programs, pretty much everyone agrees that we're still a long way from real equality of opportunity. And that tells us something really deep. The barriers are about more than just the price of tuition. They're about things like social networks, cultural advantages, and the quality of schooling you get from day one. Stuff that a check from a financial aid office just can't easily fix. All right, for our final section, we're going to zoom out a bit and do a kind of rapid-fire overview of some of the other really passionate debates that are always swirling around education. These are big disagreements about what we should teach, how we should teach it, and who we should be teaching in the first place. First up, the classic debate over the 3 R's. On one side, you've got people pushing for a back-to-basics approach. They argue that the number one job of schools is to make sure every single kid is great at reading, writing, and math. Without that solid foundation, they say, all the other stuff like creativity and critical thinking just isn't possible. But on the other side, critics worry that focusing too much on just those core subjects can crush curiosity and doesn't really prepare students for a modern world that needs collaboration and new ideas. Next, there's this idea of lifelong education. This really challenges the old school view that you're just done with learning in your late teens or early 20s. The argument is that in today's fast-changing world, you have to keep learning to adapt in your career and just to grow as a person. Now, the debate isn't really about whether it's a good idea. Most people think it is. The debate is about how to actually make it happen. Who pays for it? Should it be the government, employers, or individuals? And how do you make it genuinely work for adults who are juggling jobs and families? Then you have the incredibly important and complex world of special needs education. The central debate here is often about the best learning environment. Should students with disabilities be in traditional classrooms to help with social integration? Or do they do better in specialized schools with all the right resources and staff? There is no easy answer. It's so different for every child. And underneath all of this is the huge challenge of resources. Providing those small classes, special equipment, and one-on-one help is incredibly expensive, which leads to some really tough conversations about funding. And finally, let's talk about the school environment itself. Of course, everyone agrees that bullying is terrible and has to be stopped, but the debate on how to actually do that is still going strong. One side favors zero-tolerance policies and really strict punishments. Another approach focuses more on things like counseling and teaching empathy, trying to get to the root cause of the behavior. And this whole thing has gotten way more complicated now, with schools trying to figure out how to deal with cyberbullying that happens online outside of school hours. So we've walked through how school systems are designed, the hidden problems with how we measure them, the limits of financial aid, and the big debates about what education is even for. And it all keeps coming back to that one goal: equality. After looking at all these complexities, we're left with one final question to think about. If all the solutions we've tried so far haven't completely closed the gap, what's next? What's the next debate, maybe the uncomfortable one, that we really need to start having? Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, like, and leave a comment to support.